Welcome back, Fast and Furious fans. This is Let's Be Real Brad. Today we're going to be talking about the third installment in chronological order in this series with Fast and Furious. This is the first film in the franchise to have a completely different tone than those technically three first films. This movie is a lot darker, it's more serious, and you don't have many of those cheesy one-liner jokes in this one. This feels like more of the modern day action movies that we'd come to expect, that has some grit and some stakes along the way. But I will say though, this movie does have a ton of issues, and it almost makes this movie just another average modern day action movie. So let's get right into the positives first, and we're going to start with the performances. Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, who play Dominic Toretto and Brian O'Connor respectively, do a pretty good job in this movie. They are the ones that hold this movie together and pretty much make it watchable. But I love the chemistry they have in this movie because it's very different than we've seen them in the first movie, and we have to see both these characters struggle to work together and have some of this bad blood between them. And I love how Vin Diesel and Paul Walker are able to play that off so well. Everyone else in this film just ranges from okay to kind of bad. Like, this is the first time that I have seen Gal Gadot in a movie, and I didn't really like her all that much, even though she's in the small role that she is in. As much as this story can be really uninteresting at times, with being extremely boring with this drug cartel guy that we don't really care about all that much, I really do like that they brought back that original story from the first one and expanded on it, and we see the relationship between Brian O'Connor and Dominic Toretto and Letty and Mia and the whole gang. I really love that they really centered these characters down only into a few characters, and we get more of that kind of stuff. This movie is very focused on them almost the entire time, and we do get a lot more of a character development, especially with Dominic Toretto and with Brian O'Connor, seeing where they both go, and I really like that a lot. This is really where the franchise starts to get a little intense. I mean, it always has been since the first film, but in this movie, there are some really unrealistic things that happen with the action, and I just didn't care at all. I welcomed it with open arms, and it was some good high-stake tension throughout the movie. I also enjoyed the cinematography in this movie, that it's much different. It's not colder and darker, but it almost explains the relationship between Brian O'Connor and Dominic Toretto, but the cinematography also kind of explains the characters' inner thoughts and how they're feeling about their lives and the situations that they're in, and I think that's really underappreciated for a dumb action Fast and Furious film. So now let's get right into the negatives with this one. The first one being that it's pretty boring. The first act of this movie is really good. I felt we were thrown into this movie with the perfect amount of exposition, and that we just learn about these characters. We switch from Brian to Dominic, and it just feels like everything's going into place to have a great film. But once we get into this second act, it drags so much as it muddles between the cartel drug thing of trying to catch this guy and then going with Letty and Dominic. It doesn't feel so streamlined and doesn't flow as well as I wanted to. But once we get to the third act, this movie does pop off and become the entertaining action movie that we wanted. I also think that the directing by Justin Lin in this movie, being his first in the franchise and many more to come, is definitely his weakest. This movie is very choppy with the action, even though that some of it looks really good. The car racing scenes were very underwhelming to me, as the first two films and even Tokyo Drift all looked really good. But this movie just feels like there was editing every single second, trying to up the stakes, and it made this movie very hard to watch sometimes, especially with some of the hand-to-hand combat scenes as well. I also think the music just doesn't add anything to this movie like the previous films. I understand that this movie's a lot more serious and you're going to use more of a score than actual songs, like a soundtrack, but I found both of them to be completely weak and mostly forgettable. And my last negative is with the writing. I do enjoy the fact that we get the Dominic Toretto and Brian O'Connor stuff like I mentioned before, but I also think that the story itself and how we get from point A to point B are just not that interesting. Overall, this is another average, mediocre Fast and Furious film that I do like a little bit than Too Fast, Too Furious, but unfortunately, it does have many of the same issues as that first film, just being really boring and taking itself a little too seriously. So I'm going to give Fast and Furious a 5 out of 10. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the following review.